Around 1150 AD, one of the most sophisticated civilizations in North America simply walked away from everything they had built. Massive stone cities, astronomical observatories, trade networks spanning thousands of miles, and vanished so completely that even their name is borrowed from a Navajo word meaning ancient enemies. Scientists recently extracted DNA from their remains in Chaco Canyon, and what they found raises a question that mainstream archaeology has never fully resolved. Were the Anasazi a single people, or something far stranger than we assumed? There is a canyon in the high desert of New Mexico where the wind moves through the ruins of something that should not have existed where it did. At an elevation of over 6,000 feet, in a landscape that receives less than 9 inches of rain per year, a civilization built structures so precisely aligned with the movements of the sun and moon that modern engineers still debate how they did it without metal tools, without the wheel, and without any written language to record their calculations. They are called the Anasazi, a name that does not belong to them, borrowed from the Navajo and meaning, depending on the translation, either ancient people or ancient enemies. They called themselves nothing we can recover because they left no writing. What they left instead were walls. Hundreds of thousands of tons of shaped sandstone stacked into great houses rising 4 and 5 stories, containing hundreds of rooms, oriented to within fractions of a degree of true north, south, east, and west, with doorways and windows cut to frame the rising sun on the solstices and equinoxes, with an accuracy that feels less like accident and more like obsession. The largest of these structures, Pueblo Bonito in Chaco Canyon, contained over 600 rooms and was the largest building in North America until the 19th century. It was built beginning around 850 AD and expanded over the following 2 centuries with a consistency of design that suggests not improvisation, but a long-term architectural vision held across multiple generations. Whoever planned Pueblo Bonito expected it to be finished by people not yet born when the first stones were laid. And then, sometime around 1150 AD, they left. The great houses were abandoned. The roads, yes, roads, hundreds of miles of them, arrow straight, up to 9 meters wide, carved into the desert floor, with no apparent concern for the terrain they crossed, fell silent. The system of signal fires that connected Chaco to outlying communities across a region the size of Ireland went dark. Within a generation, one of the most complex societies in pre-Columbian North America had dispersed into the surrounding landscape, and the canyon they had built their world around was empty. Archaeologists have proposed drought, resource depletion, social collapse, and warfare as explanations. All of these likely played a role, but none of them fully accounts for the completeness of the abandonment or for one deeply uncomfortable detail that excavations at Chaco Canyon have repeatedly uncovered: evidence of cannibalism, not as isolated incident, but as systematic practice, with human bones showing cut marks, marrow extraction, and cooking residue in patterns identical to the processing of animal remains for food. This evidence is not fringe. It has been published in peer-reviewed journals and confirmed at multiple sites. It suggests that whatever was happening in Chaco Canyon in its final decades was not simply a society under environmental stress, but something considerably darker. Into this already complicated picture, genetic science has now introduced a finding that reframes the entire story. Researchers analyzing ancient DNA extracted from skeletal remains in Chaco Canyon identified a specific mitochondrial subclade designated B2Y1 among individuals buried in the highest status rooms of Pueblo Bonito, the rooms with the richest grave goods, the most elaborate burial arrangements, the clearest markers of elite social position. Mitochondrial DNA is inherited exclusively through the maternal line, meaning this subclade traces an unbroken chain of mothers stretching back through time. What makes this finding significant is not simply that the subclade exists, but where it clusters and what its distribution implies. The B2Y1 subclade appears in the Chaco elite burials across multiple generations in the same high-status context, suggesting that the ruling class of Chaco Canyon maintained its position through matrilineal descent, that power, status, and likely religious authority passed from mother to daughter across at least 9 generations of continuous occupation. This is not merely a genetic curiosity. It is a window into a social structure of remarkable stability and deliberate design, in which a specific lineage held centralized control over an entire regional network for centuries.
It also means that when Chaco collapsed, what collapsed was not just a collection of buildings or a trade system. What collapsed was a dynasty, a maternal lineage that had held together a civilization across 9 generations simply ends in the archaeological record, as abruptly as the construction stopped and the roads went quiet. The B2Y1 subclade does not disappear from the Americas. It survives in some descendant Pueblo populations today, but its concentrated, high-status, centralized form at Chaco is never replicated. Whatever that lineage represented, whatever authority it carried, it did not survive the abandonment. This reframes the question of why Chaco was abandoned in a significant way. If power was held by a specific matrilineal elite, then the collapse of Chaco may have been less about environmental pressure alone and more about the breakdown of that elite's legitimacy or physical survival. Drought and resource stress could have undermined the authority of a ruling class whose claim to power rested on their ability to mediate between the human and divine, to predict celestial events, to organize labor, to maintain the roads and the signal fires and the great houses. When the rains stopped coming and the system began to fail, the population may not have simply fled. They may have rejected the lineage that had organized their world, dispersed deliberately, and built new communities in new places under new social arrangements. The descendants of the Anasazi are almost certainly the modern Pueblo peoples of the American Southwest, the Hopi, the Zuni, the various Rio Grande Pueblo communities. And many of these communities maintain oral traditions that speak of the abandonment of Chaco not as a catastrophe, but as a necessary departure, a decision made for spiritual and moral reasons, a leaving behind of something that had become corrupted. These traditions have generally been treated by Western archaeology as metaphor. The genetic evidence of a concentrated elite lineage that abruptly loses its central position suggests that the oral traditions may be describing something real. There is a specific Hopi word, koyaniskatsi, meaning life out of balance, life in turmoil, a state of affairs so disordered that it calls for a new beginning. It became known outside indigenous communities through a 1982 film, but it originates in a worldview that stretches back centuries, possibly to the very moment when the people of Chaco looked at what their civilization had become and chose to walk away from it. The canyon today is a national historical park. Tourists walk through the ruins of Pueblo Bonito on designated paths, reading interpretive signs that describe construction techniques and trade goods and astronomical alignments. The wind moves through the same doorways it moved through 800 years ago. The walls that took generations to build are still standing in a desert that receives less than 9 inches of rain per year, at an elevation where winters are brutal and summers are short. Whoever built this place understood something about permanence. They cut their stones to last. They aligned their walls to the sky with a precision that outlasted their civilization by centuries. And they left behind, encoded in the DNA of their dead, the faint outline of a dynasty. 9 generations of mothers and daughters holding a world together, until the day they didn't, and the canyon fell silent, and the roads that led everywhere led nowhere, and the signal fires on the distant mesas went out
one by one, and were not lit again. The B2Y1 subclade survives. The lineage continues, dispersed, in the blood of people living in pueblos across New Mexico and Arizona today. The dynasty ended. The people did not. And somewhere in that distinction, between the ending of a system and the survival of a people, is the actual story of what happened in Chaco Canyon, still being told, in DNA and in oral tradition, and in the particular way the light falls through a 900-year-old doorway on the morning of the winter solstice, exactly as it was designed to do.